So, Steve, thanks for joining me on our little podcast experiment.
No problem. My pleasure.
I thought that this would be an excellent way for me to maybe, talk restaurant with you and just get it out of my system, so that when I'm around other people, that it's not always in their face the way it always seems to be.
Yeah, no, we do tend to end up on restaurants a lot. I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe we don't have anything else in common. Is that it?
That's it. That's
That
it.
could be it. That's it. Okay.
All right. So for our first podcast episode, I wanted to talk a little bit more about details, and so this episode we titled "Competition is more than the products on your menu." Right. The premise being that if everybody's making a good crispy chicken sandwich, which are popular, or everybody's making a fantastic taco, or the Espresso Martini has made its way back into the top 10 cocktail items again, but everybody makes one. So if everybody's doing that, then what is your competition? Like, what are you really competing on? And this stems from a conversation that I had with, and it was a taco bar, but one of my clients, very successful, was doing really well, but I wanted to say, look, guys, it's more than just making a great margarita, right? Because if that's all you're competing on, you're in trouble. It's got to be the other side of things.
Oh, no.
So, I certainly have a laundry list of details, but I wanted to hear, what did it mean? What does it mean to you when I say that?
Well, I think at a high like macro level, I mean the simple thing to settle on to start with is the guest experience, right? So whether it's whether it's like you said, a crispy chicken sandwich or an espresso martini, yeah, I mean they can all be made with the same ingredients and sort of taste and look the same, but at the end of the day, it's that people return and you get loyalty based on how you make people feel at your
Exactly.
restaurant, right? So it's yeah, what's your atmosphere like, right? Is the music, what's your music choice, right? How are they greeted when they walk in the front door, right? That sort of thing. Is your hospitality warm and friendly? Is that what you want to do, or are you trying to be a little bit more edgy and sort of a little bit more sort of high end and a little bit standoffish? But if that's your brand and stuff, then and that's how you're setting yourself apart, then great. But even simple stuff like what does your restaurant look like? And maybe this is the best place to start with this. Like what does it look like from the outside when you're walking into that place? Like I've been to lots of restaurants where you're outside and there's cigarette butts and trash and that sort of stuff. I'm like, well, it's those little details that I think that help successful restaurants set themselves apart, right? So to me, that's the guest experience would be one, and that's we're not even at the table yet, right?
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I mean, last time you and I worked together, we had a valet department, and I appreciate that not every restaurant does. Or if they're using a valet service, they're pimping it out to a third party. But I mean, that experience parking the car, if you don't think that affects your overall service and your that entire experience for the guest, you're out of your mind,
Yeah,
right? And so, especially if it's a third party, you got to make sure that those guys up front, guys and girls, are on par doing what you need to do. But I think in more than that, even if we said, okay, let's assume, you know, I say service is 95%, right? Because everybody's always missing the last 5%, and that last 5% changes, and that's going to be a topic for another day. But assuming that the service is there, there's more than that. It's the cleanliness, it's the maintenance, it's the light bulbs. I haven't operated my own dining room now for almost 10 years, but I still, every dining room I walk into, can pick up burnt out light bulbs,
yeah,
right? I mean, really, it's like, where's Waldo with me? It just stands out. Boom, there's one there, right? And I think that kind of attention to detail, and this is where I'm kind of preaching to, is everything the way it's supposed to be, and do you take stuff for granted?
yeah. And I think too, what some restaurateurs forget, they think, well, it's everything has to cost money, right? But there's some of those things, right? Whether it's making sure the garbage in front of the restaurant's picked up, making sure your floors are clean, making sure the light bulbs are changed, making sure the place isn't super dusty or or whatever, right? Are your windows out front clean? I mean, those are little to zero cost, right? So then those aren't going to necessarily impact your bottom line at the end of the day, other than taking a little bit of time to go do that, right? But those, I mean, those are sort of low cost, but can have high return things like sending your busser or hostess out before service to just make sure the front of the restaurant's clean and tidy, right? And are the windows streaky? Is the door handle sticky? That kind of stuff, right? And that, because for me, that's your impression walking in. So even if you had the best espresso martini and crispy chicken sandwich, which is an odd combo, by the way, right? Even if you had the best one ever in the city, but the experience walking in, you've already put yourself behind. You're already like minus zero before they've even seen the hostess and sat down, right?
And I don't know that those are points that you can recover. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
not like that. I'm sure there is bonus points. If it's a scorecard, maybe there are some bonus points. Maybe the server or somebody that goes above and beyond. But in general, if you're walking to the host stand and you're already behind, there's a problem. But and I think that in general, one of the advantages to the chain restaurant is then why they in general, in my opinion, do a better job at those kind of details is the checklist,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Your last chain restaurant, right? You've worked for a number of multi units before. Then and I think that the checklist is the almighty God in most of those places. And I'm not talking about just the kitchen. Kitchens have lots of them, but even just opening checklist and did things get done, and that's how. Did somebody go check the front door? Did somebody make sure the front door is unlocked?
Yeah.
How many times have I been to a restaurant where they're supposed to have been open for 10 minutes already, and the hostess is there, but she forgot to unlock the door?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh,
and
it's
so
the SOP, the standard operating practice, and that's why the chains are good at. But the standalone independent restaurant can still do that kind of stuff, right? It's not, yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it just sort of it's. But how many do you go into? And I think this is when we say 50% of restaurants fail in their first year, is that are they missing those simple guest experience things, right? Where they're not just covering those bases that are frankly cost nothing to do, but and vary at these restaurants from shift to shift depending on who's on, right? It might be if a different floor manager doesn't care about checking the front for garbage, and it's another one does, that's where that inconsistency comes from, and I think that's why the chains, as much as they get a hard time, do really well. It's because people know what they're going to get. Right, and it's that's a new restaurant, but I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know if I want to try that. Well, let's just go to Cactus again, right? And which is for restaurateurs and guys like us, that's a little frustrating because you feel like you want people to go experiment and try these independent places for sure. But if they're not hitting those simple little tasks off the hop, trying to get people to come back is going to be a challenge. So,
well, I tell you, the conversation that I had with this customer in particular was around toilet seats, right? Because they've got maybe 9 or 10 different stalls, but I challenged them. I said, I bet you out of those 10 stalls, I bet you 3 of those toilet seats are loose. Now, is that a big deal? Well, no, but it makes a difference.
yep.
And it's one of those things that either because the managers aren't in them, but nobody's looking, nobody's checking, but like, guys, these are the small details. I was in a place this morning doing an audit, and the bar itself is just sticky. I mean, I'm sitting on the bar and I got my computer and I've got my elbow down while I'm typing, and you know what? Like it's just. It wasn't that it wasn't wiped down; it was clean. Somebody did their side duty, but once or twice or a month, or maybe once every 2 months, a little Murphy's soap needs to go down that because it takes off all the people dirt. And
Yeah.
it just isn't being done, and I think it becomes like that nail pop on the wall that you see every day, but it's not a big enough a deal to deal with, and then it kind of goes gray on you.
It's funny. I've been watching. I don't know if you watch. Have you watched The Bear?
Some of it. I've really enjoyed a little bit, but I haven't seen it all.
Yeah, so I just on my most recent flight, just kind of there to Saskatoon and back. I basically binged The Bear, the season three, and obviously that's high end fine dining, and
And it's TV. Like,
yeah, the
it's TV.
yeah, and the TV, but the attention to detail that they go to in scrubbing down the back of the house like every night, and the making sure your cutlery is sort of exactly where it's supposed to be, and the flour, that sort of thing. Obviously, don't need to go to that extent, but I think restaurants do miss on a regular basis. Some of the simple cleanliness things that just becomes part of the background for those that are working there, but for those guests coming in that kind of go like, oh, that's sticky, or the windowsill's dusty, or those are the things that sort of they may not jump out, but they're in the back of the mind. So when we talk about what you know what's differentiating, what's your differentiator from your competition, if the
Exactly
other
right.
place is cleaner, right, and I go, I
I'm not
want
talking
to,
about.
yeah,
I'm not talking about they've got a better overnight cleaner. I'm
yeah,
talking about the little details
yeah,
that the server or the staff miss because they just walk right by, and
yeah,
I think that is a little bit taken for granted. Um, like they go nose deaf, in so to speak, because they just see it every day. It's like, well, hold on, like it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. I think that that you need to try and get that into the staff. So when we talk about how so much of this can be fixed for almost nothing.
well, I think it comes from the top, and those standards have to be set from the ownership and the senior management, restaurant director, general manager, whatever the title happens to be, on down, and that you just make it part of your culture, right? That our culture, this restaurant is, cleanliness above godliness, right? That, it's you can't let these things slide. The details matter. So yeah. And then having that as your SOP and your standard every single day, right? And that, and like I said, if we're only talking about as people are walking into the restaurant, right? And but you have to set yourself up for success on that entire guest experience, not just what it is they're eating. So, you know, it's and be frankly be uncompromising on those standards and your standards of cleanliness, right? And it's because guests will notice, and they may not be the tipping point for them to be becoming a regular or a semi-regular or even visiting you ever again, right? But it's those things that, as they get layered on, if you start missing other little details, right, then,
Where
you
does it
know,
go? Yeah,
yeah,
where does it
yeah,
go?
you're sort of making that decision for them. And then for someone like me who's been in the restaurants for forever, if I see the dining room is not as clean as it should be, I'm like, well, if this is the dining room,
Absolutely.
what's it look like in the back, right? So and that's where my head goes. But I think for a lot of people that happens too, right? If this dining room's not clean, I'm like, ew, I don't know,
I
right?
knew a story. When I was in restaurant school, the one of the things that they talked about, they did a Southwest Airlines did a thing where they were looking at coffee rings on their tables, right? Because they just said, "Wow, if that they made such a big deal about making sure those coffee tables, the tables that came down, were clean and didn't have coffee rings, because the implication was, well, the plane is going to be shaky. If they didn't clean this and the detail's not there, I'm afraid to put my hand in the pocket because, like, oh my god, what else? And really, they made a direct line from the rings of coffee to the rivets holding the plane together.
Yeah,
So they just said, you know what, like, and so that it lends itself right directly to you said. Said, geez, if this is what the floor in the dining room looks like, the kitchen scares me. And
yeah.
I went to Father's Day buffet. My mom and my son took me out for family Father's Day buffet, um, and I think we were in the second seating or third seating, and I was like, oh my god,
And the staff are gonna.
the place just looked like hell. And
I remember a couple Mother's Days like that, so we were just
and
waiting.
hey, and I've been on the other side of it, but like, wow. and I appreciate that a lot of it was the dining room was because those tables had kids at them, and kids just throw everything. And but
Yeah.
that has to be cleaned up. Like that has to be attacked. Um, and it's that kind of attitude which I really admire. When I was at Disney, I saw a kid drop his ice cream onto the pavement. Of course, he's upset, but I tell you, before he had turned around and complained to his mom, "Oh my God, I don't have ice cream." Somebody from Disney was on it.
Oh
Right,
yeah.
they were there. Not only were they cleaning it up, but somebody else was delivering the kid a replacement. Now, I appreciate that Disney is above and beyond, but why can't that attitude be adopted everywhere?
Yeah, you just have to want to have the will to do it. But even things like, in a dining room, um, because I'm just working this through in my head. We came through the front door, we've seen the hostess, and he or she's been friendly and welcoming, and you're at your table, and you sit at your table, and like you mentioned about the tables being sticky. But what drives me nuts is a wobbly table,
Oh man,
right? Or you've got two deuces put together and one, and they're like this, right? But like we set this table. There's clearly somebody cleaned and set the table, right? And then the
they just did
host,
not give a
maitre d',
shit.
whatever, came by and sat us at the table, and it's rocking, right? Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff just frankly pisses me off. Like, because I don't think there's much of a good excuse for that other
So is
than,
that
oh, we
lack of
did.
training or lack of giving a shit?
Yeah, right. It's so it's clearly not important to somebody, right?
Right.
So, but that impacts my entire dining experience because I'm sitting there all night, and if I'm there for dinner with my wife or whatever, right, I've got my foot on the table
Yep.
base,
Yep.
so if we lean on the table, it's not rocking,
Well, I
right?
am. I mean, I do that, right? I'm a leaner.
Yeah.
Okay, but
Right? Or yeah, or if they put two dishes together, make a four top, and they're like this, you're constantly worried about putting your drink on
well,
the
especially with
seat.
linen,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. No,
All
I've
that.
seen it a million times.
Yeah, so I mean, to put a little bit of a bow on this, because we could go on this first topic for probably an hour anyway, and we haven't even handed out menus yet. Um, I think it's those little things and the attention to detail that truly impact that guest experience, right? So, yeah.
Well, and same thing, and I'm not trying to bring this up in a way that rags on restaurants because so many restaurants do a fantastic job, but this is I think the changing of the season or the season or the shoulder season where now everybody just needs to sit down and take a half a step back and say, guys, this is important. What are we missing? And
Yeah.
how can we build it into our daily routine to make sure that if somebody's coming to us and has a great experience, if somebody comes to the neighbor or another kind of style of restaurant that's our competition, and the food is good and the service is great, what else are we competing on? And I think that it has to be those things.
Yeah, it's the easy wins, right? And if you're not scoring points with the easy wins, well then yeah, you're making life harder for yourself, right? Than you should. So, right, and then yeah, that those are all the sort of intangibles that load on to that guest experience.
Well, and I think with COVID in particular, the COVID I think has culled a lot of that restaurant group that was on the bubble. They were doing okay, but they weren't great. So a lot of that now is if they haven't closed yet, they're on the way to closing. So you really that like standing out with just great service and great product. What I'm saying is that I don't think that's enough anymore. It has to be the whole package.
Yeah, for sure. I think that leads me to sort of the next point I had for this. What helps set you apart other than just great food and great drinks. I think it's you thinking about your brand, as a whole, right? And what is your brand identity, right? And how do you set yourself apart, right? Is it your style of service? Is it your look, your logo, your music, those sort of things? Is it being, hyper local and farm to table? Is it being, we're cheap eats and good drinks? What is it that builds your brand? And I think I think successful restaurants, whether they're chains or independents, the ones that know who they are and what it is they're doing are the ones that are generally going to be more successful. I think the ones that try to be everything to everybody, right? And you go in, the menu is like 12 pages long and those sort of things. Those are the things that, will make it harder for restaurants, right? So I think, how do you set yourself apart? Know who you are and execute it. I don't know if you agree with me, but
Yeah, I think in this case, if we wanted we spent 25 minutes talking about the problem. If we wanted to spend 1 minute talking about how to fix it, it is have the conversation and then make a checklist and then follow the checklist every day.
yeah,
And if that means, it is good policy for the opening manager to walk around and check and see how the night cleaner did instead of taking it for granted, right? To go through and like you said, did somebody walk out the front door? Is anybody checking on the valets? You've got a staff uniform policy. Are we set for that? And is everybody is it at the level that we're looking for? And
yeah,
it doesn't, again, something like that doesn't cost you anything. Sit around, have that conversation, figure out what 5 or 7 things are the most important to you today, and put them on a checklist and see if everybody can agree that this is the standard, and then have them looking. So I think I think it's a. I mean, I call it the 1 minute fix, but clearly it's not a minute. But once you identify the problem, I think it makes it doesn't cost you anything to fix this.
for sure. Yeah, I know the chains, or one of the chains I worked at back in the day. It was, we had a manager's, it was just a card stock what we printed, and every day you went through, and it was your MOD checklist, and it had, walk outside and, check for garbage, check for light bulbs, but then also at your pre-shift, checking, checking uniforms, and, checking shoes. Is your apron clean? Do you have your wine opener? All those sort of things as well. So just, all that sort of, simple, easy win stuff, right? But if you need to write it down and have a checklist, and then what we used to do as well is that checklist had to be sort of submitted or left in the log at the end of every shift as well, right? So the GM or the owner, whoever it was coming in the next day, could see that, sort of everything was done, right? And then, but holding your team accountable.
I know at McDonald's, I've seen the managers go walking around with their phone, or maybe it's a dedicated thing, and flash that they were there, and they've got maybe it's a barcode on some of the posts outside, the garbage cans outside, so they can track to say, yes, I was here at this time and I checked it.
Yeah,
Now, I'm not saying that, but that's their checklist. They've just made it digital.
they've just digitized it. Yeah, for sure.
If there's one thing that we know McDonald's is good at, it's the checklist and policy and procedure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So the 1 minute fix: have the conversation, make the tools you need to make sure it gets done, and follow up.